The radio crackle was static and a voice that did not belong to anyone who wanted them alive. American soldiers, you are surrounded. Your ammunition is counted. Your air support is grounded. Your sniper is dead. Staff Sergeant Dale Harmon presses back against a frozen rock face and watched his breath crystallize in the minus 19-degree air. Around him, 17 soldiers lay scattered across the ravine floor, their white-gray fatigues dusted with 3 feet of wind-driven snow, their faces carrying the hollow expression of men who had stopped calculating survival odds because the mathematics had become insulting. The enemy commander's voice continued, unhurried, almost gentle. We know you have 41 rifle rounds remaining, perhaps 7 for your sidearms. 1 grenade, yes, perhaps functional, perhaps not. Harmon's jaw tightened. That count was accurate, exactly accurate, which meant someone had been watching them carefully enough to track every expenditure across 5 hours of sporadic contact. The thermal imaging equipment on those vehicles wasn't decorative. Surrender now. Walk out with dignity. This valley does not need to become your grave. Corporal Eric Whitmore looked up from the radio handset he'd been clutching for the past hour, waiting for a response that would never come. His eyes asked a question his mouth couldn't form. Harmon shook his head once. 20 vehicles. 2 APCs on point for main battle tanks in the center column. Support and command elements trailing behind. Against 18 exhausted soldiers with enough ammunition for roughly 2 rounds each. No air support within 200 kilometers. Drone operation suspended. Helicopter extraction was a fantasy discussed by men who had already accepted what came next. The blizzard screamed across the valley floor at 40 kilometers per hour, gusting higher, visibility collapsing to 150 meters and dropping. In any other circumstance, the storm would have been salvation. In this one, it merely ensured they would die cold. Specialist Marco Ruiz, the youngest soldier before today, before Palliser took a round to the throat, knelt in the snow approximately 30 meters east of Harmon's position. His gloved finger was tracing something in the white powder. Harmon didn't need to see it to know what he was writing. His sister's name. Sergeant, Whitmore said quietly. What do we do? Harmon didn't answer immediately. What was there to say? The lead sniper, Sergeant First Class Greg Pallister, lay under a tarp approximately 15 meters behind him, his throat destroyed by a round that had traveled nearly 2,000 meters through impossible conditions. Whoever had taken that shot was either supernaturally skilled or supernaturally lucky, and neither possibility improved their situation. Pallister had been their best chance, their only chance of precision engagement against armored targets. He had been selecting his position when a round found him, his scope not even raised, his calculations not even begun. Someone out there was better, and that someone had friends in tanks. If that opening hooked you, buckle up, because this story only gets more intense from here. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and impossible missions, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another one. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to that frozen valley, where 18 soldiers waited for an end the mathematics had already confirmed. The enemy commander's voice returned. You have 5 minutes to respond. After that, we advance. The valley will remember nothing but the cold. The transmission cut. Harmon looked across his scattered unit. Ruiz was still riding in the snow. Private First Class Denham was reloading his M4A1 for the 3rd time, a nervous habit with ammunition they couldn't afford to cycle. Sergeant Keene was checking Pallister's body again, as though something might have changed, as though death was negotiable. 17 faces. 17 soldiers who had followed him into this unnamed grid coordinate, because order said so and trust said more. 17 people whose families would receive folded flags and classified condolence letters that explained nothing and apologized for less. Harmon pulled his binoculars from his chest rig and glassed the valley floor through the driving snow. The lead APC sat approximately 1,800 meters out, its turret-mounted machine gun pointed directly at their position. Behind it, the convoy waited in disciplined formation, engines idling, exhaust plumes rising into the white murk. 20 vehicles, 27 confirmed personnel minimum, thermal imaging, integrated communications, a counter-sniper team that had already proven its capability. And Harmon had 41 rounds. He lowered the binoculars. Whitmore, Sergeant, Any response from battalion? Nothing, Sergeant. Haven't had signal in 4 hours. Storm's killing everything above company frequency. Harmon nodded slowly. He had expected that answer. The mountains and the blizzard together created a communications dead zone that no amount of field improvisation could penetrate. They were alone out here in the truest sense of the word. No extraction, no reinforcement, no acknowledgement that they existed at all. Just snow and enemies and the gradual certainty of an ending. Ruiz. The specialist looked up from the snow where his sister's name was already disappearing under fresh accumulation. Sergeant, stop writing. Ruiz's hand froze. His face shifted through something complicated, something that wanted to argue but knew it couldn't. We're not done yet, Harmon said. He didn't believe it. He couldn't afford to believe it. But saying it mattered more than believing it in moments like this. Ruiz withdrew his hand slowly. He didn't resume writing, but he didn't stand either. The wind shifted, carrying with it the diesel growl of armored vehicles adjusting positions. The convoy was preparing. The 5 minutes had already begun counting down. Sergeant First Class Greg Pallister had been a sniper for 11 years. He had deployed 6 times, accumulated 14 confirmed kills across 3 different theaters, and once held a position for 43 hours in conditions that would have broken most men by hour 20. He died in less than 1 second. Harmon had watched it happen. One moment Pallister was moving to his selected overwatch position along the eastern ridge. His precision rifle slung across his back, his movements careful and deliberate against the ice-slicked rock. The next moment his body was falling, the crack of the distant shot arriving half a heartbeat after the impact. Too late to serve as warning, only as announcement. The round had entered through the gap between his helmet and his body armor. Throat, exactly where the ceramic plates ended and human vulnerability began. A shot like that required either perfect luck or perfect skill, and the enemy did not seem to be relying on luck. Harmon had called for immediate suppression fire, but there was nothing to suppress. The shooter was somewhere beyond their effective range. Hidden in terrain, they couldn't see through whether they couldn't penetrate. By the time anyone could have returned fire, the shooter had already displaced. Standard counter-sniper protocol. Textbook execution. Pallister bled out in the snow, while Keene applied pressure that couldn't help, and Whitmore called for medevac that couldn't come. That had been 5 hours ago. Since then, the enemy convoy had tightened its encirclement with the patience of a predator that knew its prey was already exhausted. No aggressive movement. No wasteful ammunition expenditure. Just a gradual, suffocating compression of tactical options until the only choices remaining were surrender and death. Professional, disciplined, terrifyingly competent. The kind of enemy that made you understand why some battles were lost before they began. Sergeant, Keene said, crawling through the snow to reach Harmon's position. We need to talk about final defensive positions. Final. The word hung between them like ice forming on a wire. Harmon looked at Keene. 10 years of service reflected in his eyes, campaigns and casualties, and the quiet calculus of men who had seen enough endings to recognize when one was approaching. I know, Harmon said. If they advance with the tanks in front, we can't stop them, even with the launcher. He glanced toward the single at-4 rocket launcher that Specialist Tran was clutching like a talisman. It was their only anti-armor option, and Tran had already reported that the firing mechanism felt loose. 1 shot. Maybe, if we're lucky and they're not. I know. And if the APCs flank while the tanks draw fire. I know, Keene. The sergeant fell silent. There was nothing more to add. They both understood the tactical geometry. The enemy had armor, numbers, firepower, and patience. Harmon's unit had courage and cold, and roughly 2 minutes of combat effectiveness before their ammunition ran dry. Mathematics did not care about courage. Get the men consolidated. Harmon said finally, tight grouping. If they advance, we make them pay for every meter. We don't surrender. Keene nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't suggest alternatives. He simply turned and began crawling back toward the scattered positions, carrying orders that would determine how 17 men spent their final moments. Harmon watched him go. Then he turned his attention back to the convoy. The lead APC was moving, slowly, testing their response. The turret rotated in a lazy arc, the machine gun tracking potential target areas without committing to any single bearing. Behind it, the tanks maintained their formation, their main guns elevated to firing angles that suggested confidence rather than caution. 1,800 meters, perhaps slightly more, close enough to see. Too far to effectively engage with M4A1 rifles and diminishing ammunition. The perfect distance for execution. Harmon's hand moved the radio on his chest. A pointless gesture. No one was listening. Battalion was silent. Air support was grounded. The only voices on the frequency were enemies who already knew they had won. And then, static burst through the channel. Not enemy traffic. Different. A frequency authentication tone he hadn't heard in hours. Harmon's fingers tightened on the handset. Crossbow 6. This is Overwatch Actual. Do you copy? The voice was female. Young. Clear and steady despite the howling storm that should have been audible in the background. Harmon blinked. He didn't recognize the call sign. Didn't recognize the voice. Overwatch Actual wasn't part of his communications matrix. Overwatch Actual. This is Crossbow 6. Identify yourself in position. A pause. Half a second. Wind noise in the background, muffled and distant. Crossbow 6. I am positioned on your northern ridge. Elevation 700 meters above valley floor. I have eyes on the convoy. They are 1,847 meters from your position, moving at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. I have a firing solution. Harmon's blood went cold, then hot, then something in between that didn't have a name. Northern Ridge. That was behind the enemy's awareness arc. That was where no one was supposed to be. Overwatch Actual. Say again your position. Northern Ridge. Rock Depression at grid coordinate Whiskey 794. I have been static for 11 hours. The enemy has not detected me. 11 hours. The blizzard had been building for 11 hours. Who the hell are you? Harmon demanded. Her name was Cassidy Marlowe. She was 18 years old, turning 19 in March, and she had been lying motionless in a frozen rock depression since before dawn, watching the world through a scope that had belonged to her father. The ghillie suit she wore was white-gray Winter Mountain specification, hand-modified to break her thermal signature in ways that made standard imaging equipment see nothing but rock and ice. She had urinated into the snow twice, without moving from prone position. She had consumed 3 energy gels and 400 milliliters of water through a tube system integrated into her hood. She had not felt her toes in approximately 4 hours. None of this mattered. What mattered was the convoy below, and the 18 soldiers trapped in the valley, and the fact that everyone who had been responsible for protecting them was now dead, or out of position, or grounded by a storm that did not care about human planning. Everyone except her. I say again, Crossbow 6. I have a firing solution on the lead vehicle. Machine gun operator is exposed through the forward hatch. I can take him. Static filled the channel. She could hear the staff sergeant processing what she had just said, his disbelief almost audible in the quality of the silence. Overwatch Actual. I don't have you on any coordination frequency. What is your unit assignment? 9th Reconnaissance Battalion. Special Sniper Development Program. Secondary Overwatch designation. I was attached to your mission as backup for Sergeant Pallister. More silence. Cassidy didn't blame him for the confusion. Her assignment had been handled through channels that most field commanders never saw. Master Sergeant Douglason had arranged it personally, citing her qualification scores and her psychological evaluation and her demonstrated capability in conditions that routinely broke candidates twice her age. Some personnel may require adjustment to candidates' age and gender, Finn had written in her assessment file. This is their limitation, not hers. She had read that assessment exactly once. Then she had reported to her position on the northern ridge 48 hours before the scheduled patrol, selected her firing location from topographic data, and begun waiting for a moment that might never come. Now the moment had arrived. Her father had taught her this, though he had died before she understood what he was teaching. Captain Raymond Marlowe had been a combat sniper for 19 years. He had operated in theaters she still didn't have clearance to know about, had taken shots at distances that sounded like fiction, had survived conditions that should have killed him a dozen times over. He came home from each deployment quieter than before, his eyes carrying knowledge that he never shared and she never asked about. But he shared other things. At the kitchen table when she was 8 years old, he had shown her how to calculate windage using nothing but observed environmental data. He had explained bullet drop as mathematics, not mystery. He had let her disassemble and reassemble his personal rifle until she could do it blindfolded in under 90 seconds. The mountain doesn't care about your feelings, he told her once. Only your math. She was 10 years old when he didn't come home. The mission was classified. The mountain where he fell had no name on any tactical map, just a grid coordinate and a report that would never be released. They sent his rifle home instead of his body, the weapon cleaned and zeroed and packaged in a case that carried no explanation. She inherited that rifle. She was holding it now. Overwatch Actual. The staff sergeant's voice finally returned. I'm showing no record of a secondary Overwatch position being designated for this operation. Correct, Crossbow 6. The designation was filed under Sigint Supplemental. Your communications package wouldn't include it. Another pause. She could imagine him processing, weighing, try to reconcile the impossible with the desperate. You said 11 hours? Affirmative. I occupied this position at 0430 hours. Convoy arrived in the valley at approximately 0700. Sergeant Pallister was engaged at 0917. I have been tracking enemy movements since then. Why didn't you engage when Pallister was hit? The question was logical. It was also wrong, because engaging at that point would have revealed my position without tactical advantage. The enemy sniper was positioned to counter any immediate response. I required time to map their movements, identify their command structure, and calculate firing solutions across the full engagement window. Cassidy's finger rested alongside the trigger guard of her rifle, not on the trigger. Never on the trigger until the moment demanded it. Her father had taught her that discipline before she understood what discipline meant. You watched us for 5 hours, the sergeant said. His voice carried something new now. Not anger exactly. Something closer to recognition. I watched the convoy for 5 hours. I watched your position for reference only. My mission parameters were clear. And those parameters are to provide precision Overwatch support in the event of primary sniper incapacitation, to engage targets of opportunity that exceed standard infantry capability, to preserve friendly forces through selective elimination of enemy command and control assets. Static crackled. Wind howled somewhere in the background of both positions. You're 18 years old, the sergeant said. Cassidy didn't respond to that. There was nothing useful to say. The report I received mentioned a secondary sniper attachment. Female, first graduate from the development program in 11 years. I assumed it was an administrative error. It wasn't. More silence. Then, can you really take that shot? Cassidy looked through her scope. The machine gun operator on the lead APC was visible through the forward hatch, his face wrapped against the cold, his attention directed toward the trapped soldiers below. He was laughing at something. She could see his shoulders moving. 1,847 meters. Wind northwest at 38 kilometers per hour, gusting higher. Temperature -19. Bullet flight time approximately 2.3 seconds. She had calculated this shot 63 minutes ago. She had verified it 27 minutes ago. She had locked it in her memory 14 minutes ago, waiting for authorization that might never come. Now she had authorization, or something close enough. Crossbow 6, the shot is confirmed. I require only one thing. What's that? Cassidy breathed slowly, letting the cold air fill her lungs, feeling her heartbeat slow to the rhythm her father had taught her. Permission to engage. The silence on the radio stretched for approximately 12 seconds. 12 seconds in which Staff Sergeant Dale Harmon looked across the frozen valley toward the northern ridge that he couldn't see through the blizzard. Try to imagine an 18-year-old girl lying motionless in a rock depression for 11 hours, waiting for permission to save his life. He couldn't imagine it, but he didn't need to imagine it. He needed to make a decision. Overwatch Actual. Standing by. If you miss, I won't. The confidence wasn't arrogance. Harmon had served with enough snipers to recognize the difference. Arrogance sounded hollow. This sounded like mathematics. The enemy has thermal imaging on their vehicles. If you fire from that position, they'll identify your location within seconds. Negative, Crossbow 6. My suit breaks thermal signature across 17 separate insulation layers. Their imaging will register my heat output as background geological activity. They will know a shot was fired from the northern ridge, but they will not be able to fix my exact position. And the sound, wind is carrying northeast at 38 kilometers per hour. Acoustic detection will place my location approximately 40 meters west of actual. By the time they triangulate, I will have displaced. Harmon processed this. The girl, whoever she was, had thought through variables he hadn't even considered. How many rounds do you have? 23 available. I have already expended 2 for ranging adjustments. Flight characteristics differ slightly from standard loads due to temperature-induced powder variance. 23 rounds against 20 vehicles. The mathematics still didn't work, but the mathematics had stopped working hours ago, and somehow they were still alive. What's your engagement priority? Vehicle commanders and communications systems first. Immobilize decision-making capability. Secondary priority is machine gun operators and exposed personnel. Tertiary priority is mobility systems if targets of opportunity present. I will not waste ammunition on armor I cannot penetrate. Clear, methodical, prioritized, like she had been trained by someone who understood that every bullet was a decision, and every decision had to mean something. Overwatch actual, I want to be clear. If this goes wrong, it won't. Let me finish. Harmon's voice hardened. If this goes wrong, we have no backup, no extraction, no cavalry. You understand that? The radio crackled with static. Then, Crossbow 6, my father died on a mountain like this one. His mission was classified. His body was never recovered. They sent his rifle home in a case that explained nothing. Harmon said nothing. I am using that rifle right now. Every shot I take is calculated with methods he taught me before I understood what he was teaching. Every breath I draw before the trigger pull follows a rhythm he instilled in me at a kitchen table when I was 8 years old. The wind screamed across the valley. Snow swirled in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. I understand backup, Sergeant. I understand extraction. I understand cavalry. I also understand that sometimes there is no cavalry. Sometimes there's only the math in the moment and the choice to pull the trigger or let good soldiers die while you wait for someone else to save them. Harmon closed his eyes. Pallister was dead. Air support was grounded. Battalion wasn't responding. The enemy commander was preparing to advance. His confidence, so complete, he had broadcast their ammunition count on an open channel. And somewhere on the northern ridge, an 18-year-old girl was asking for permission to try. Overwatch actual. Standing by. You have permission to engage. God help us all. The channel went quiet. Across the valley floor, the lead APC continued its slow advance. 1,700 meters now. The machine gun operator adjusted his position in the hatch, stamping his feet against the cold, completely unaware that a targeting reticle was centered on his chest from a position he had already dismissed as impossible. On the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe exhaled. Her heartbeat dropped to 54 beats per minute. Her finger moved from alongside the trigger guard to the trigger itself. The rifle was cold against her cheek. The same rifle her father had carried across 3 continents and a dozen classified operations. The same rifle they had cleaned together at their kitchen table, while he explained trajectory and wind drift and the mathematics of control violence. The mountain doesn't care about your feelings. Only your math. She had done the math. Now she listened to the world, waiting for it to tell her the right moment. The wind shifted, dropped for half a second. A micro pause in the blizzard's endless howl. Cassidy pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound was swallowed almost immediately by the storm, transformed into something distant and directionless, a crack that could have come from anywhere or nowhere. The bullet left the barrel at 820 meters per second. It traveled 1,847 meters in 2.3 seconds, dropping approximately 17 meters across that distance, drifting northeast approximately 42 centimeters due to crosswind, spiraling through air that was dense with ice crystals and moisture that would have thrown off lesser calculations. The machine gun operator on the lead APC was still laughing when the round entered his chest. He stopped laughing. He stopped everything. His body collapsed backward into the vehicle. his weapon unfired, his hands never reaching the handles he had been preparing to use against 18 trapped soldiers. In the valley below, Harmon saw the operator fall, saw the APC's turret suddenly go still. "Contact," someone shouted. "Sniper contact, vector unknown." The enemy radio erupted with traffic, panicked, confused. The disciplined patience of moments before evaporated in a single, impossible heartbeat. And on the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe cycled her bolt and began selecting her second target. The second shot came 43 seconds after first, long enough for the convoy to understand they were under attack, not long enough for them to understand where the attack was coming from. The target was a commander of the 2nd APC. He had emerged from his hatch to assess the first casualty, his binoculars raised toward the southern ridge where no one was waiting, his attention completely committed to the wrong direction. 1,912 meters. Slightly more elevation drop. The wind had picked up again, gusting to 45 kilometers per hour. Cassidy adjusted, exhaled, fired. The round struck the commander's left shoulder and exited through his right lung. He fell across the top of his vehicle and didn't move again. In the valley, Staff Sergeant Harmon watched the second body fall. "She's actually doing it," Whitmore said. His voice sounded strange, hollow with the impossibility of what he was witnessing. "Quiet," Harmon said. "Keep your heads down." The convoy was now in chaos. 2 commanders dead in less than a minute from a direction they couldn't identify. The disciplined formation that had seemed so inevitable was fragmenting as vehicles tried to simultaneously find cover that didn't exist and locate a shooter they couldn't see. Cassidy's third shot came 18 seconds later. This time her target was a communications array mounted on the lead APC. A precision equipment kill that required threading the round through a gap between armor plates and into the antenna junction box. The range was 2,014 meters. The target aperture was approximately 15 centimeters. The round found it exactly. The antenna array exploded in a shower of sparks and torn metal. Primary communications for the lead element went dark. Now they couldn't coordinate. Now they couldn't call for guidance or report contact or request instructions from whoever was commanding this convoy. They were deaf and confused and bleeding leadership faster than they could replace it. Shot 4 followed. Then 5. Then 6. Each one methodical. Each one calculated. Each one selected not for maximum casualties, but for maximum disruption. Communications nodes. Command personnel. Anyone who looked like they were trying to reorganize a response. By minute 8, the convoy had lost 5 personnel and 2 critical systems. No vehicle had moved forward. The advance had stalled. On the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe cycled her bolt for the 7th time and scanned for her next target. The counter-sniper team was deploying. She had expected this, known it was inevitable. The enemy had demonstrated precision marksmanship when they killed Pallister, which meant they had trained shooters available. Those shooters would now be tasked with locating her position and eliminating the threat she represented. She watched them through her scope. 2 figures emerging from a support vehicle near the rear of the convoy, their movements quick and professional, their equipment suggesting they had done this before. They would start by analyzing bullet trajectories, calculating impact angles, estimating range and direction based on wound characteristics and equipment damage patterns. That process would take approximately 3 minutes. After that, they would narrow her position to a general sector. Another 4 minutes. After that, they would begin systematic observation of that sector, looking for any visual indicator that might reveal her exact location. That was when things would become dangerous. Cassidy noted their positions and returned to target selection. Shot 7. The driver of the 3rd APC, visible through a gap in his vehicle's armored windscreen. 1,871 meters. Moving target. Approximately 10 kilometers per hour as he tried to reverse into better cover. The round went high by 12 centimeters, struck the windscreen frame, and ricocheted into useless tumble. Miss. Cassidy cycled the bolt without reaction. A miss was data. She adjusted her calculation for the apparent wind increase and selected her next target. Shot 8 found a squad leader who had dismounted to establish infantry perimeter. He had been waving his men toward positions that would never be occupied. Shot 9 disabled the secondary communications array on the command vehicle. Shot 10 and 11 removed 2 more exposed personnel who had made a mistake of thinking the storm provided adequate concealment. It did not. 19 rounds remaining. In the valley below, Harmon watched the convoy's disintegration with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "She's taken them apart," Sergeant Keene said. He had crawled to Harmon's position, his face a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been reverence. One at a time, methodically, like she planned every shot days ago. Harmon didn't respond. He was watching the counter-sniper team through his binoculars. 2 figures moving with purpose along the convoy's eastern flank, their attention fixed on the northern ridge. They were getting close. "She knows," Keene said, following his gaze. "She has to know they're hunting her. She knows. Can she relocate in time?" Harmon thought about the conditions on that ridge. -19 degrees. Blizzard winds. 3 feet of snow. Moving quickly would mean breaking concealment. Moving slowly would mean being found. "I don't know," he said finally, "but she's not stopping." Shot 12 cracked across the valley. Another figure fell. By minute 14, the counter-sniper team had narrowed her position to approximately 40 meters of ridgeline. Cassidy knew this because she was watching them work. Their triangulation methods were sound. Their communication appeared efficient. They had correctly identified the general arc from which her shots originated and were now systematically scanning that sector with optics that probably included thermal enhancement. Her ghillie suit would defeat the thermal component. She was confident in that. But optics were another matter. If they looked hard enough, long enough, at the right spot, they would see her, and then she would die. This was acceptable mathematics. She had known from the moment she occupied this position that extraction was unlikely. The mission parameters didn't include a way out. They included a way forward, a way to protect 18 soldiers who would otherwise become casualties of a battle they could not win. Her father had understood this kind of mathematics. He had made the same calculation on a mountain she would never see, in conditions she would never know, against enemies whose identities would remain classified forever. He had not come home, but the soldiers he protected had. Shot 13, a forward observer who had climbed onto one of the tanks to get a better visual angle on the trapped Americans. 2,118 meters. Significant wind compensation required. The round struck approximately 8 centimeters from intended point of impact, still center mass, still lethal. The observer fell from the tank and disappeared into the snow. 16 rounds remaining. The enemy commander's voice crackled over the open channel again. No longer calm, no longer confident. All units, we are under precision fire from the North Ridge. Counter-sniper team is triangulating. All non-essential personnel remain inside vehicles. Do not expose yourself. Cassidy listened to the transmission without reaction. Inside vehicles meant they were afraid. Afraid meant they were thinking about survival instead of attack. Thinking about survival meant the advance had stopped completely. Her job was working. Shot 14. The counter-sniper team spotter, who had made the mistake of raising his binoculars above the rock formation he was using for cover. 2,234 meters. The wind was howling now, 50 kilometers per hour. Visibility was dropping toward 100 meters. The conditions were approaching the outer limit of what her rifle could reliably handle. She fired anyway. The round was affected by a gust she hadn't anticipated. It went wide, struck the rock formation approximately 3 meters from the spotter's position, and sent fragments showering across his face. He ducked, screamed something into his radio. Not hit, but rattled. Mississippi, her second of the engagement. 15 rounds remaining. Cassidy cycled the bolt and assessed her situation. The counter-sniper team now had a much more precise fix on her location. That miss had given them valuable data. They knew her approximate range. They knew her general bearing. They would be adjusting their own calculations, preparing their own shot. She had perhaps 3 minutes before they were ready. In those 3 minutes, she needed to continue engaging targets while simultaneously preparing to survive a direct counter-engagement. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The thinking is already done by the time you're waiting. You're just listening to the world until it tells you the right moment. She had done the thinking 48 hours ago when she selected this position. She had accounted for a counter-sniper response. She had identified secondary cover options within her operational area. Now she needed to execute. Shot 15 targeted the communications package on the command vehicle again. The first round had disabled primary systems. This round was intended for the backup array that was now broadcasting the convoy's increasingly panicked traffic. 2,192 meters. The antenna was a small target, perhaps 30 centimeters wide. The round struck at dead center. The command vehicle went silent. Now the convoy had no coordination at all. Individual vehicles, individual commanders, individual panic. She knocked out their comms. Whitmore reported from a valley below, his voice carrying something that sounded almost like awe. They're blind and deaf up there. Harmon nodded. He was still watching the counter-sniper team through his binoculars. One of them was raising a rifle, taking aim at the northern ridge. They had found her. Overwatch Actual. This is Crossbow 6. You have incoming. Counter-sniper team has acquired your position. Recommend immediate displacement. Static. Then Cassidy's voice, calm as arithmetic. Negative Crossbow 6. I am aware of their position. They do not have my exact location. They are estimating based on trajectory analysis. Their first shot will be wide. How do you know? Because their spotter is using binoculars with focal limitation that prevents accurate resolution above 2,000 meters. They think I am approximately 3 meters east of my actual position. Harmon stared at his radio. You can see that I have been observing them for approximately 11 minutes. Their equipment is good. Their technique is sound. But they are working at the edge of their effective range, and their estimation reflects that. A shot cracked across the valley. Not from Cassidy's position. From the counter-sniper team. The round struck the northern ridge approximately 3 meters east of where Cassidy was lying, exactly where she had predicted. Confirmed, she said. They are now cycling for a second shot. I have approximately 18 seconds. Cassidy displaced. The movement was minimal, a lateral shift of approximately 2 meters into a secondary position she had identified during her initial reconnaissance. The new location offered slightly less protection, but significantly different angular geometry. Anyone calculating her position from the previous shots would be aiming at empty rock. The counter-sniper's second round arrived 14 seconds later, striking her former position with lethal precision. If she had remained there, she would be dead. She was not dead. 13 rounds remaining. In the valley below, Staff Sergeant Harmon exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. She's still up, Whitmore confirmed, watching through his own binoculars. I think I saw her move. Maybe 2 meters. Did the enemy see it? I don't know. The visibility is getting worse. I can barely see the ridge at all now. The blizzard was intensifying. Wind speeds had to be approaching 60 kilometers per hour on exposed ridgelines. Temperature was dropping further. Conditions were becoming unsurvivable for anyone not trained specifically for extreme cold weather operations. Cassidy Marlowe had been lying in those conditions for nearly 12 hours. Harmon didn't know how she was still functioning. Didn't know how her fingers could still manipulate a trigger with precision. Didn't know how her eyes could still track targets through a scope in a whiteout that defeated military-grade optics. But she was still functioning, still firing, still systematically dismantling a convoy that had believed itself invincible. Shot 16 came from her new position. The target was a lead tank's commander who had made the catastrophic decision to open his hatch for a visual assessment of the battlefield. His thermal imaging showed nothing on the northern ridge. His radio provided no intelligence. His patience had finally broken. 2,308 meters. The shot was at the extreme edge of her rifle's reliable engagement envelope. Any further and bullet stabilization would become unpredictable. Any stronger wind and drift compensation would exceed her scope's adjustment range. The round traveled for 3.1 seconds. It entered the commander's exposed head just above the brow line and continued into the tank's interior. The hatch slammed shut. The tank's main gun, which had been elevating toward a firing position, stopped moving. She dropped the lead tank's commander. Harmon reported to no one in particular. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. She's shooting at over 2,000 meters in a blizzard, and she's hitting everything. Keene said nothing. There was nothing to say. The convoy was now leaderless at the tactical level. No communications, no commanding officers, no coordinated response capability. 20 vehicles that had expected to execute a simple encirclement had become 20 isolated units, waiting for instructions that would never come. And the sniper on the ridge kept firing. Shot 17 removed a driver who had exited his vehicle to check damage to his track assembly. 2,161 meters. Clean kill. Shot 18 disabled the targeting optics on one of the trailing APCs. Equipment kill. Precision threading through a gap in armored cowling. Shot 19 missed. The wind gusted over 55 kilometers per hour at the moment of discharge, carrying the round nearly a meter wide of its intended target. The bullet struck vehicle armor and sparked uselessly into the snow. 10 rounds remaining. The engagement had been ongoing for 19 minutes. Harmon's unit had not fired a single shot. They had simply watched as one person, invisible in the storm, systematically destroyed the force that had been preparing to kill them. Sergeant, Ruiz said. His voice was different now. Not the hollow resignation of a man writing his sister's name in the snow. Something else. What do we do when she's done? Harmon looked at him. The specialist's eyes were focused on the northern ridge with an intensity that bordered on reverence. We survive, Harmon said. We extract. We go home. And her? Harmon didn't have an answer for that. On the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe cycled her boat for the 20th time and evaluated her remaining options. 10 rounds. Approximately 12 viable targets. The counter-sniper team was still active, though their second shooter had not taken another shot since her displacement. Either they were repositioning, or they were waiting for better data. Either way, they would fire again soon. The lead tank was the critical variable now. Its commander was dead, but the vehicle itself was still operational. If the gunner or driver assumed command and decided to advance on the trapped American position, she would need to stop that vehicle. Stopping a tank was not the same as stopping a person. Her rifle was chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, powerful, effective against personnel and light equipment, but against the frontal armor of a main battle tank, it was functionally useless, unless she hit something that wasn't armor. The commander's viewport was still open. The aperture was approximately 8 centimeters by 22 centimeters. Small, incredibly small for a shot at this distance in these conditions. The range to that viewport was 2,340 meters. Beyond her rifle's reliable envelope, beyond what her training had certified her for, beyond what anyone with her experience should reasonably attempt. But if that tank advanced, Harmon's unit would die. Mathematics. Cassidy began her calculations. The tank began to move. Its treads bit into the frozen ground with mechanical indifference to the conditions that were killing men. The engine roared against the wind, diesel exhaust pluming into the blizzard, mass and momentum carrying it forward at approximately 10 kilometers per hour. 800 meters to Harmon's position. Perhaps 5 minutes of travel time on this terrain. Less if the driver accelerated. 5 minutes until a main battle tank achieved point-blank firing range on 18 soldiers with no anti-armor capability. It's coming, Whitmore reported, his voice cracking. Lead tank is advancing. Main gun is traversing to firing position. Harmon watched the vehicle approach. 50 tons of armor death crawling toward them through a storm that couldn't stop it. Tran, he called. Ready the F4. The specialist's hands were shaking as he positioned the launcher on his shoulder. One shot. Questionable firing mechanism. The tank's frontal armor would almost certainly deflect anything that wasn't a perfect hit on a weak point. They were going to die. Overwatch actual. This is Crossbow 6. Lead tank is advancing on our position. We cannot stop it. Can you engage? Static filled the channel. Longer than usual. Long enough for Harmon to wonder if she had finally been hit. Then her voice returned. Crossbow 6, I'm aware of the advance. The tank's commander viewport is open. Aperture approximately 8 by 22 centimeters. I have a firing solution at 2,340 meters. Harmon process that distance. Process the aperture size. Process the conditions. That shot is impossible. Negative, Crossbow 6. The shot is improbable. There is a difference. The tank continued forward. 700 meters now. Main gun nearly aligned. Improbable, Harmon repeated. Approximately 17% success rate based on my current calculations. Wind is gusting beyond consistent measurement. Bullet flight time will be approximately 3.1 seconds. Target aperture will present for approximately 4 seconds before tank achieves hull-down firing position. 17%. 1 chance in 6. Better than 0. Take the shot, Harmon said. Understood. Stand by. On the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe settled her breathing to a rhythm that existed below conscious thought. Her scope was centered on the tank's commander viewport. The aperture was barely visible through the driving snow, a dark rectangle against the vehicle's gray-green armor, impossibly small at this distance. 8 centimeters by 22 centimeters. At 2,340 meters, that aperture subtended approximately 0.002 degrees of her scope's field of view, less than a thumbprint held at arm's length, in a blizzard, with gusting crosswinds exceeding 50 kilometers per hour. The thinking is already done by the time you're waiting. You're just listening to the world until it tells you the right moment. Her father's voice, clear as it had been 18 years ago at the kitchen table, clear as it had been the last morning she saw him alive, when he kissed her forehead and told her he would be home soon. He hadn't come home, but his lessons had. Cassidy listened to the wind. It howled and screamed and tore at the ridge with fury that seemed almost personal. Snow swirled in patterns that defied prediction. Temperature gradients created invisible currents that would push her bullet in directions she couldn't fully calculate. But wind was not random. Wind followed rules. Rules could be understood. She watched the snow between her position and the tank, watched how it moved, how it swirled, how it paused. There, a low, building in the micro patterns, 30 meters out, moving toward her. In approximately 4 seconds, that low would pass over her position. In approximately 7 seconds, it would reach the midpoint of her bullet's trajectory. In approximately 10 seconds, the tank would be too close. Now, Cassidy pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The round left the barrel at 804 meters per second, slightly reduced from optimal due to cold-induced powder variance. It began to drop immediately. 17 meters of total drop across this distance. She had adjusted for that. It began to drift northeast. Significant crosswind compensation required. She had adjusted for that. But the wind was not constant. It gusted. It shifted. It did not follow the pattern she had predicted. Her bullet flew for 3.1 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she had no control, no adjustment capability, no ability to influence the outcome. She had done the math. She had listened to the world. She had pulled the trigger at the moment she believed was right. Now she watched. The round dropped, drifted, spiraled through conditions that would have scattered any normal trajectory into useless tumble. It flew past the 2,000-meter mark, past 2,200, past 2,300. The commander's viewport loomed in her scope, 8 centimeters by 22 centimeters. A dark rectangle growing infinitesimally larger as the tank continued forward. The round struck the viewport's upper right corner. It penetrated. It continued into the tank's interior. The vehicle shuddered, stopped. Its engine coughed once and fell silent. The main gun, which had been 2 seconds from achieving fire and alignment on Harmon's position, drooped to the side and did not move again. On the northern ridge, Cassidy Marlowe exhaled slowly. 9 rounds remaining. Crossbow 6. This is Overwatch Actual. Target neutralized. Tank is immobilized. Harmon's voice came back after a long pause. I saw it. I don't believe it, but I saw it. The convoy broke. Not immediately. Not cleanly. But the psychological impact of watching their lead tank die to an invisible shooter in an impossible storm was more than disciplined training could overcome. Vehicles began reversing. APCs that had been pressing forward suddenly found urgent reasons to reposition. Support elements that had been waiting for the advance signal instead received screaming radio traffic about withdrawal corridors. The counter-sniper team was the last to move. They fired one more shot at Cassidy's position before extracting. The round struck approximately 4 meters from her actual location, testament to how thoroughly she had displaced since their initial triangulation. They were good. She was better. Their vehicle disappeared into the storm at minute 22 of the engagement. 9 rounds remaining. She would not need them. Crossbow 6. This is Overwatch Actual. Enemy formation is withdrawing. Counter-sniper element has displaced from the valley. Recommend immediate exploitation of tactical advantage. Harmon's response came within seconds. Acknowledged. Overwatch Actual. All crossbow elements. Prepare to move. We're taking the command vehicle. The staff sergeant had seen what Cassidy had seen. The enemy's command element, stripped of communications and leadership, was vulnerable. Its crew was dead or disabled. Its security perimeter had collapsed when the infantry element scrambled back to their carriers. The vehicle contained intelligence, communications logs, encryption equipment, strategic data that could save lives far beyond this frozen valley. It was also, more practically, their only way out. Keen, take a fire team and flank left. Ruiz, you're with me. Whitmore, maintain radio contact with Overwatch. If anything moves on that ridge that isn't her, I want to know immediately. Sergeant, how will we know if something on the ridge is her? Harmon paused, looked toward the northern ridgeline that he still couldn't see through the blizzard, because if it was her, whatever was moving would already be dead. The unit moved. 18 soldiers who had been preparing to die suddenly found themselves executing an offensive operation against a retreating enemy. Their ammunition situation hadn't improved, but their tactical situation had transformed completely. 1 sniper, 22 minutes, 14 confirmed kills, 9 probable, 7 vehicles disabled. Cassidy watched them advance through her scope. Her work was done. The convoy was broken. The soldiers were moving. The mathematics had shifted from certain death to probable survival. She should have felt something. Triumph. Relief. The satisfaction of a mission accomplished under conditions that exceeded any reasonable expectation. Instead, she felt cold. Her fingers were numb, had been numb for hours. The only reason she could still manipulate her rifle was muscle memory, so deeply ingrained it bypassed conscious sensation. Her toes were beyond feeling, possibly beyond saving. Her core temperature was dropping despite the ghillie suit's thermal management. 12 hours of static position in minus 19 degrees extracted a price that willpower alone couldn't cover. She needed to move, needed to extract, needed to get somewhere warm before the cold took what remained of her extremities. But she couldn't move yet, not until she was certain. Harmon's unit reached the command vehicle at minute 26. 2 quick shots, fired by Sergeant Keene, eliminated resistance that turned out to be a single wounded driver attempting to destroy classified materials. They were inside within 90 seconds. Crossbow 6, this is Overwatch Actual. I have visual confirmation on your element. You are clear to extract. Copy, Overwatch Actual. Harmon's voice carried something new now. Warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. What's your extraction plan? Cassidy looked down at her hands. Blue-white beneath the glove fabric, trembling despite her control. I will displace the grid coordinate Whiskey 782 and await vehicle recovery. Negative, Overwatch. We're coming to get you. That is not necessary. Crossbow 6. Your priority is extraction of captured intelligence and evacuation of wounded. I said we're coming to get you. Cassidy was silent for a moment. Understood. Crossbow 6. She began to move. The first attempt to stand sent lightning bolts of pain through her legs. Muscles that had been locked in the same position for 12 hours screamed protest against sudden demands for mobility. She ignored them. The second attempt got her to her knees. The third got her feet, swaying against wind that tried to push her back down. She collected her rifle, her father's rifle, the weapon that had traveled from classified operations to a kitchen table to a frozen ridge where it saved 18 lives. Then she began the descent. They found her 200 meters down from the ridge, collapsed against a rock formation, her ghillie suit white with accumulated snow, her rifle still clutched in hands that no longer responded to commands. Corporal Whitmore reached her first. He knelt beside her, checked for pulse, found it weak but present. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something beyond the physical world. Hypothermia. Severe. The kind that killed people quietly while they dreamed about warmth. She's alive, he reported. Barely. We need to get her inside now. Harmon was there within seconds, followed by Keene and Ruiz. They formed a protective circle around her, blocking the wind while Whitmore worked to stabilize her condition with what limited medical supplies they had. She shouldn't have been alive. 12 hours in those conditions, motionless, alone, maintaining the concentration required for precision shooting at ranges that exceeded 2,000 meters. The human body wasn't designed for that kind of endurance. The human mind wasn't built for that kind of isolation. But she had done it. Can you hear me? Harmon asked, leaning close to her face. Marlowe, Cassidy, can you hear me? Her eyes shifted, found his. Something sparked in the blue depths that had been fading toward gray. Crossbow 6. Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and broken by cold and dehydration, and the strain of hours spent breathing frozen air. You did it, Harmon said. You saved us. All 18 of us. We're extracting now. Her hand moved, weak, trembling. It found her rifle stock and squeezed. My father's weapon. We'll take care of it. We'll take care of everything. They lifted her, carried her down the ridge toward the captured command vehicle that would serve as their extraction platform. The blizzard continued to rage, but it felt different now, less like death closing in, more like the world itself was celebrating what had happened in its frozen heart. Cassidy Marlowe had been dismissed by colleagues who struggled with her age and gender. She had been assigned as backup because the idea of a teenage girl serving as primary precision support challenged assumptions that ran deeper than tactical planning. Master Sergeant Douglas had written, some personnel may require adjustment to candidates' age and gender. This is their limitation, not hers. He had been right. The command vehicle's interior was warm, heated by systems designed for extended cold weather operations. They positioned Cassidy near the primary thermal vent and wrapped her in everything they could find while Whitmore monitored her vitals. Her temperature began to rise. Her pulse strengthened. Her eyes, which had been drifting closed, opened again with something that looked like awareness returning. Sergeant, Harmon knelt beside her. Rest. We've got everything under control. The mission parameters. Her voice was stronger now. Still weak, but present. Secondary overwatch support in event of primary incapacitation. I fulfilled the parameters. You exceeded them. You exceeded everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then, my father never came home from a mountain like this one. Harmon said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. I used to wonder what he was thinking in those last moments. Whether he was afraid. Whether he wished he had done something different. Her eyes found the rifle that one of the soldiers had carefully secured beside her. I understand now. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the soldiers he was protecting. That's all there is at the end. The math and the people of math is for. Harmon watched her face. Watched the peace that was settling over features that had been locked in concentration for 12 hours. He would be proud of you, he said. I know. Not arrogance. Just certainty. That's not why I did it. She closed her eyes. I did it because the math worked out. Because 18 soldiers needed someone to do the math. Because the mountain only cares about the math. And today, my math was good enough. Specialist Ruiz was standing near the vehicle's rear hatch, his eyes fixed on a ridge they had just ascended. The ridge where a teenage girl had lain motionless for 11 hours, waiting for a moment that might never come, preparing for shots that exceeded any reasonable expectation. He thought about his sister, about the name he had written in the snow, about the ending he had accepted as inevitable. He thought about how wrong he had been. Sergeant, he said quietly. Harmon looked up. The list, the one we think is fixed, the one that says what's possible and what isn't. What about it? Ruiz shook his head slowly. It's not fixed. The list is never fixed. Sometimes something happens that isn't on the list and everything changes. The vehicle began to move, slowly at first, then faster as the driver found traction on the frozen terrain. Behind them, the valley fell silent. The convoy had withdrawn. The storm continued to rage. The ridge where Cassidy had lain was already disappearing under fresh accumulation. No one would ever know what had happened there, except 18 soldiers who would carry the story for the rest of their lives. Whitmore's voice broke the silence. She saved us. 3 words. quiet, simple, the only words that mattered. The vehicle continued through the storm, carrying its cargo of survivors and capturing intelligence and one teenage girl who had done the impossible, because impossible was what the mathematics required. The mountain had demanded everything she had. She had given it. And somehow, impossibly, she had been enough. The sun would rise eventually. The storm would break. The valley would return to the silence that had existed before soldiers and vehicles and rifles arrived to disturb its frozen peace. But the story would remain. It would be told in briefing rooms and training facilities and quiet conversations between soldiers who had seen enough to know when they were witnessing something extraordinary. An 18-year-old girl, a rifle inherited from a father who never came home, a mountain that only cared about math, and 22 minutes that changed everything. If this story kept you engaged, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Tell me, what would you have done if you were Harmon, trusting your unit's survival to an 18-year-old voice on a radio you'd never heard before? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. The vehicle continued through the storm. Cassidy Marlowe slept, and in the frozen valley behind them, the snow continued to fall, erasing every trace of what had happened there except the memory carried by those who survived it. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.